Hi, I'm James and welcome to my review of the Perry Miniatures British Infantry Zulu War 1877 to 1881. So this is the box cover. Lovely bit of artwork by Peter Dennis, gives a good impression as to what the figures should look like. We'll have a look at the figures themselves. So there's a number of sprues come in the box. We have 6 of the basic infantry sprue, and what we'll do is we'll break this down, have a good look at the detail on those figures in a minute. But you have 6 of those, giving you 30 basic infantry. We've then got 2 command sprues. Now if you look at the sprue, you'll see that there's 2 officer figures and 2 casualty figures, and a lot of fun bits and pieces which again we'll look at in a minute. You also get the standard bases that you get with, I think, virtually all of the Perry boxes in a very appropriate sand colour, so there's 1 set of those. And then finally there is a 4-page information booklet which again we'll go through later on. So this is the infantry sprue. As I said, there are 6 of these with 5 figures on each. And what we're going to do is we are now going to break it down and look at each of the parts within that sprue. So looking at the bodies, we can see there 3 of them, well kitted out, carrying all the correct equipment that they would normally carry. They've got the 2 20 round ammunition pouches, they've got the water bottle, the haversack and the expense pouch with an extra 30 rounds in it there, so that's entirely accurate. They're not carrying the valise, which would normally be left on the wagons or in camp. The only thing they really might have added were the greatcoats and the mess tins, but these would generally also have been left in camp. So they're probably ideal for Isandlwana or for Rorke's Drift. I can't fault them for that. You'll also see in this picture there's 3 of the 5 Zulu warheads. These have got the dyed tropical helmets, and you've also got 5 of the more ornate home service helmets which expand the range a little. It's worth noting, if you're building it based more on film, particularly Zulu, you will tend to see that they are wearing probably closest to the home service helmet with the plate on the front and lack of any dyeing or any cover. So if you did want to do a personality figure or 2 from that, removing the spike would probably give you pretty much the same effect. So here you can see the other 2 figures equipped identically. All very nice sculpts, clear equipment, and all in a slightly different pose, which is quite nice. There's another one of the standard Zulu warheads there, and there's also a very nice arm raising holding the tropical sun hat. So here you see the first of the sets of arms that we have on the sprue. You'll see that they're paired off, and if you use the ones opposite each other they fit together perfectly. You'll notice that some have got the left hand attached to the weapon, others the hand is on the arm, so it is important that you do match them up. The only thing I've spotted with the Martini Henry rifles, all of which come with this fixed bayonet, is the fact that they don't appear to have the cover over the stock of the weapon, which was very common during the Zulu War. However, having said that, if they had moulded those on, then they'd have had less use with the home service helmets. And to be perfectly honest, at this scale, particularly if you're my level of painting, just painting them on would do the job adequately. It's also nice to see that the rifles have all got slings fitted, which is something you don't always see. And here you can see the second half of the arms, which means that for the 5 figures we actually have 8 pairs of arms, plus a variation if you wanted to use the figure raising the sun helmet. So we've got plenty of variation within the arms and within the bodies. In addition to the standard heads with either the home service helmet or the tropical helmet, we have 4 extra heads, really good for personality figures. You have the two in Glengarry's, which were usually worn in camp, so again absolutely perfect for Isandlwana. They also could be used if someone had lost their helmet or something like that. We've got the bare head figure, which doesn't look particularly good in the photo but looks fine on the figure, and then we've got the bandaged head, which must have been inspired by the typical British NCO that you see doing the famous painting of the Battle of Isandlwana, like we've got here. So plenty of variation in heads as well. You've got the 5 standard, which are all different, and then you've got these 4. Worth noting, quite a few have got beards and moustaches. If you're building a home service force, they were actually prohibited in home service, but actually encouraged when they were in the field. So you probably want to steer more towards the ones without the beards if you're building that home service force. So this is the second set of the sprues. These are the whatever you want to call them, the command sprues or the officer sprues, whatever you want to call them. 2 officer figures, one of which is wearing the officer's jacket, the other one of which is wearing the patrol jacket in blue. We'll have a good look at those in a minute. You've also got 2 casualty figures, and we'll talk about some possible uses for them later on, and a lot of very nice little touches for what we've got in there. So what we'll do is we'll close up on each of these bits and have a look at what we've got. So starting with the arms, you've got a nice variety with revolvers, swords, bare-handed. You've got a colour standard with a very fine detail on the top where you've got the lion. You've got 2 spare swords, so if you use the revolver or bare-handed figure, then you've got swords you can hang on. If you are going to use the sword arms, then what I would suggest is to cut off the hilt and actually just have the scabbard hanging down by the side. Now if you look carefully at the arms, you will notice that a lot of them have got the double lot of braiding, so just be very careful that when you're painting or even building them, that you actually match up the cuffs so you end up with correct arms on both sides. But nice variety in there. It's going to give you plenty of things that you can do with your officer figures. Here we've got the 2 officer bodies, and you can see there, so one has got the obvious officer's jacket with the revolver and the ammunition pouch, and the one on the left in what's called the patrol jacket, it's got the same but with the ammunition pouch moved onto the pistol strap. So very nicely detailed again, and I like the fact you have the 2. Very useful touch if you're trying to do a scenario based around saving the colours of the 24th at Isandlwana. One of each of these gives you your 2 lieutenants. Next we have our 2 casualty figures. Very nicely done. I particularly like the one laid on his back with the equipment moved out to the side. Very often I've seen figures laid on their back and you think, well, why are they not arched up? Because of the equipment and everything they're lying on. They've done that very nicely here. It's a very nice sculpt. And then you have the lying casualty on his side. This time you can actually put a separate head and arm on, so you can get plenty of variation within that. Now these 2 are particularly useful for pin markers, particularly if you play the men who would be kings, and I'll come back to that a bit later on. So as well as the heads that you have with the sprue for the officers, which are pretty much the same as on the enlisted men, you've got 3 extra heads and a spare helmet. If you notice, one of the casualties doesn't actually have the helmet. You've got a bare head, you've got a Glengarry again, and you've also got what's usually called the pillbox type. It does have 24 on it, which kind of gives you a clue as to who they're aiming it at, because they're obviously the ones at Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift. However, again, size-wise, and my painting, that's not an issue. If it is for you, then you can obviously file that off yourself. So I've saved the best for last on this sprue. These are absolutely genius additions. We have, working our way across the top row, a pointing arm, slung rifle, pair of binoculars, and I absolutely love this next one, a notebook and pencil set of arms. The way that notebook is done, that could easily be painted up as a map that's been folded over, but it gives so much variation. Going to the bottom row, starting on the left again, we've got a sergeant's arm. Worth noting, the sergeant carried a slightly different pattern bayonet, carried a sword bayonet. It's slightly different pattern again to the sword bayonet carried by the rifles, which I originally thought, oh, I could use that one, at least have some of mine with rifles. With bayonets, no, it's a different type, unfortunately. With the 3 stripes are cast onto the arm as well. We've got a bugle arm, and then 2 very generic arms, and then the last bit is a heliograph. Now, it's a nice little touch, that, because it gives something that would make a great little objective during a game. It's a lovely little diorama, and it's something different. So it's quite a nice touch, and something you can use quite. So next we've got some figures that I've undercoated and then given a black ink wash to, just to try and bring out some of the details so you can see how well they assemble. First one's not particularly well in focus, I'm afraid, but it gives a good idea as to what you get. Second one, you can see the character on the face there. It really does stand out, and I have a hideous feeling that that one is going to get painted up slightly too early, unfortunately, as Jones off Dad's Army. Using the wounded head gives a very nice effect. Putting that same figure together with just an ordinary head would give you a very nice sentry figure. Again, nice simple one. Slightly harder to put together, that one, because I had to try and get the hand inside the sling when I was assembling it, and there was a little bit of frustration involved, but it was well worth the effort. And then my personal favourite for a personality figure has to be this one. It just looks very, very Victorian artist style to me, so I do particularly like that one. So now we come to the booklet that comes with it, and for 4 pages the amount of information put into it is absolutely stunning. The first page looks at 3 different wars that you can use the figures for, and actually picks up which ones, which units were present in each of those. It carries on then onto the second page with exactly the same, and some very nice little illustrations as well to go with it. Then it goes on to the home service dress, what you can do with there. There are limits to how much you can use these for. Fortunately, most of them, well, they are all fictitious. Examples they give are an invasion where the Navy has messed things up. It could be my personal favourite one, a chance to actually use these against Martians. Could actually even do a flip side there if you play Space 1889 and use them on Mars. I'm guessing it would be the tropical helmet on Mars, but you can paint them up however you want for something like that. Painting guide is sort of included in with it, where it talks about how everything's painted. There are a couple of things which I did pick up on there. It doesn't mention, and I've yet to see it painted anywhere, but it's very common in the illustrations, that the uniform was only issued every year, so it did get worn and patches had to be put on it, but they could be painted on fairly easily. Also, there's nothing wrong with painting a couple of the troops in civilian trousers, and there are contemporary illustrations that actually show that. One thing I did note, which they didn't put in there, was the fact that you have the 3rd East Kents, the buffs. The leather work for them wasn't whitened, it was left buff coloured. So if you are painting those up, that's something to consider. I did spot another thing as well which did make me wonder. It says that the covers weren't worn during the Zulu War on the tropical helmet. However, they do appear to have been. Ian Knight's book Combat in the Zulu War series actually has a good illustration on page 26 where the 24th were wearing covers on the tropical helmets. It's up to you. You could model that on with Milliput or whatever. Is it really worth the effort? And it is only an option. So other than that, it's a very, very nice box. Going back to the guide, the third page there also has some colours that you can use. The 58th being larger, it does note that you'll have to modify the figures for that. And then there's 3 sets of colours, quite usefully including the colours for the 24th Regiment, which are the 2 that the VCs were won for at Isandlwana. And then on the back page you've got a little bit of detail about the heliograph and a nice picture of it assembled. Picture of the 60th Rifles, King's Royal Rifle Corps, what you need to do to convert the figures for that. And it also notes at the bottom some of the details for the arms that we went through earlier. One other use that you could particularly pick up with this would be, again, if you wanted to use the Foreign Service helmet, it could be used for fighting the US. You might have to go up with a scenario for that, or an invasion of Canada for some reason. You could pick that one up fairly easily. So, overall, excellent set, lots and lots of good information in it, lots and lots of nice figures, and 2 boxes will give you a whole army for the men. So, what can we do with the troops? Assuming you're playing The Men Who Would Be Kings by Osprey, that works. Buying 2 boxes would work out as quite a useful force. That would give you 5 12-strong units, each made up of 11 troops and 1 officer. You've then got enough for 2 heliographs with 2 infantry men in one, 3 men in the other, and 3 leftover officers, 2 of which would make a very useful colour party, which you can have separately, and 1 either an overall figure, or you could add to the heliograph to make, or one of the heliographs to make up to 3 on each. Using the pin markers as well, you'd have a couple of casualty figures left over. It's one of those things, they could easily be put to use on Zulu bases if you're basing units together, so you actually have a casualty or 2 lying on there. So quite a useful mix, easy to maximise the use of the figures. The only thing I wish they had done is a kneeling figure, so that you could actually have a very good skirmish line where half are kneeling and second rank then standing, but that's a minor picky point.